My name is Carrie Donovan, 34, a digital design manager in Minneapolis, who turned late-night sketches into a six-figure career. Yet around my family, I was still the kid wasting time on computers. Last Sunday's dinner in the creaky Sioux Falls house started normal. Dad carved roast. Mom passed potatoes. Then he locked eyes on Logan and said, "Your brother worked hard for everything he has. You should learn from him." Mom echoed. No handouts, just real grit and hustle. I set my glass down hard enough to rattle the ice and answered, "Great. Then I'll stop wiring the cash that's covered your mortgage utilities and every emergency for years." Forks froze midair. Dad's face went pale. "What cash are you talking about? If you've ever been the overlooked sibling while someone else soaked up praise for zero-effort, comment where you're watching from and subscribe, because this is how I finally took back control and walked away for good." The frozen food store sat on a gravel lot just past the last stoplight, leaving Sioux Falls, its neon sign flickering between open and closed, depending on how much Dad felt like fixing it that week. Edward Donovan, my father and part-time high school football coach, treated the place like an extension of the gridiron barking orders at suppliers, the same way he drilled quarterbacks on wet Tuesday mornings. Susan Donovan, my mother, handled the books in a cramped office smelling of ink freezer burn and the cheap coffee she brewed to stay awake during inventory counts. From age 8, I stocked shelves after school, learning early that family meant showing up whether you wanted to or not, even when fingers went numb from rearranging frozen pizzas. Logan Donovan, 2 years older and built like the athletes Dad idolized, became the store's unofficial mascot almost overnight. Customers asked for selfies with the kid who threw 60-yard passes on Friday nights under those blinding stadium lights. Dad bought him protein shakes in bulk, let him skip inventory if practice ran late, and bragged to delivery drivers about college scouts already circling. Mom framed every newspaper clipping about his stats, taping them above the register so every transaction came with a side of hero worship. I discovered graphic software on the ancient computer in the back, designing fake labels for fun between slow customer lulls and the occasional rush for ice cream bars. Dad caught me once, yanked the plug with a grunt, and muttered that real work happened outside unloading pallets, not staring at pixels like some basement dweller. Mom sighed, but didn't argue, saying Logan's path would secure our future, while gently pushing me toward the mop bucket. Business slowed when a mega chain opened across the highway with brighter lights, lower prices, and a parking lot that swallowed half our regulars. Trucks stopped coming as often, and the walk-in cooler hummed over empty racks that echoed like accusations. Dad blamed lazy vendors and rising fuel costs. Mom rewrote budgets until numbers blurred into migraines. They doubled down on Logan, enrolling him in extra camps across state lines, buying new gear on credit, and hosting backyard barbecues for recruiters who promised full rides. I kept entering design contests, quietly winning small prizes they never noticed amid the chaos of Logan's signing day countdown. At 16, I built a basic inventory app that cut Mom's paperwork in half and flagged expiring stock before losses piled up. She thanked me with a quick hug, then asked if I could watch the counter while she drove Logan to another recruiter meeting 3 hours away. The store's decline mirrored home life in ways that grew harder to ignore. Dinners revolved around Logan's highlight reels playing on the living room TV volume, cranked high enough to drown out mortgage reminders. Dad analyzed plays frame by frame, pausing to point out footwork. Mom refilled his plate without asking and slipped extra cash into Logan's wallet for gas. I ate in silence, sketching on napkins until Dad snatched them away, saying art wouldn't pay the electric bill when the bank was breathing down their necks. When a national scholarship for digital arts landed in my inbox with full tuition and a stipend, I printed the acceptance letter and left it on the kitchen counter next to Dad's coaching clipboard. He glanced at it, grunted approval for the free ride, then reminded me Logan's full ride offers were bigger news and came with stadium crowds. Mom promised to attend my ceremony, but texted the morning of saying Logan's playoff game ran long, traffic was murder, and they'd celebrate double when he won state. I walked the stage, scanning rows of cheering parents, my seat section empty, except for a forgotten program fluttering under someone else's shoe. That night, I packed one suitcase, a laptop bag, and the scholarship check, then caught a Greyhound to campus housing before the sun came up. Dad called once to confirm I'd arrived safe, then launched into Logan's latest scout visit, and how the pro day invite was basically guaranteed. Mom sent care packages addressed to both of us, but filled only with Logan's favorite jerky and protein bars. No note for me. I threw myself into projects, pulling all-nighters to master user flows, prototypes, and client feedback loops. Professors noticed the hustle. Classmates asked for help on assignments I finished days early. For the first time, validation came without comparison or a sibling's shadow, and I leaned into it like oxygen. By sophomore year, I interned remotely for a Minneapolis agency, earning enough to cover books, send small grocery gifts home, unsigned, and start a separate savings account labeled Escape Plan. Dad assumed the extra cash came from Logan's part-time coaching gig at the rec center. The gap between what I achieved and what they saw widened into a canyon, but I kept building one line of code at a time, determined to outrun the noise. Senior year wrapped up faster than expected with a portfolio thick enough to impress recruiters from 3 states away, and a capstone project that won regional awards for innovative app interfaces. I accepted an entry-level digital design position at a growing agency in Minneapolis, offering $85,000 annually, plus benefits that covered relocation health insurance, and a 401k match I maxed from day one. The contract arrived the same week the final diploma did, and I signed both without fanfare, scanning the pages in a campus library cubicle, while classmates panicked over last-minute revisions. Graduation came at 22. I walked across the stage in Brookings, shook hands with the dean, and immediately started packing for the move north. A rented truck carried everything I owned up I-35 while South Dakota fields gave way to Minnesota lakes, the city skyline rising like a promise of independence. The apartment smelled of fresh paint and possibility a studio, with windows overlooking the Mississippi where I could work, without interruptions, comparisons, or the weight of family expectations pressing on every decision. 1 year into the job, now 23, the phone rang during a client presentation on responsive layouts for a major retailer. Mom's voice cracked through the speaker, explaining that the store's last delivery truck had been repossessed. The bank scheduled a closure auction in 30 days, and creditors left voicemails daily. Dad refused to answer calls, locking himself in the den with old game tapes and a bottle he claimed was for headaches. They faced eviction notices, a mortgage 3 payments behind, and no savings left after pouring everything into keeping the doors open. I muted the meeting, stepped into the hallway where fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, and felt the weight of their panic settle on my shoulders like wet concrete. Hanging up meant letting the house go and watching them scramble. Stepping in meant delaying my own goals and tying myself to a sinking ship. I chose the latter without telling anyone at the office, opening a spreadsheet that night to reroute my budget. Research led me to Mr. Barton, an estate attorney, specializing in anonymous trusts for family support without triggering gift taxes or awkward conversations. We met in his downtown office lined with leather-bound volumes, a polished desk, and a view of the skyline that made my studio feel like a closet. He drafted paperwork creating a monthly grant labeled for former small business owners impacted by market shifts and big-box competition. The funds routed through his firm appeared as official aid from a regional alumni foundation that existed only on letterhead. I funded it from my signing bonus, future paychecks, and a small inheritance from my grandma I cashed quietly. Transfers set at $2,000 each month, the first deposit hit their account before the auction date, staving off immediate disaster and buying time I hoped they'd use wisely. Dad called weeks later, sounding lighter than he had in years, mentioning a surprise grant that covered the overdue balance, left extra for groceries, and even allowed a new water heater. Mom described it as divine timing during coffee with neighbors accepting congratulations like she had filled out applications and fought for every dime. They framed the approval letter, hung it in the hallway, where Logan's trophies gathered dust, and started attending community events again, with heads held higher. Neither questioned the source beyond assuming Dad's coaching connections, or Mom's church group finally paid off in ways they never expected. I listened during rare check-ins, nodding along while finalizing wireframes for million-dollar apps and leading brainstorm sessions that shaped user behavior for thousands. The arrangement became routine faster than I anticipated. Promotions rolled in as my designs won internal awards, clients expanded contracts, and the agency grew from 20 to 50 employees. Salary bumps meant I could maintain the transfers without dipping into savings or skipping contributions to my own retirement. Colleagues celebrated milestones with happy hours at rooftop bars. I skipped to balance accounts and review statements. The grant bought them breathing room to repaint the kitchen a cheerful yellow, replace the leaky roof before winter storms, and fix the furnace that coughed through January nights. Mom started a small garden in the backyard, posting photos of tomatoes and zucchini with captions about second chances and community generosity. Dad coached a recreational league for free, telling parents the extra income wasn't necessary anymore, and focusing on drills instead of dollars. All the while, the money traced back to late nights I spent optimizing user experiences for strangers who never knew my name, debugging code at 2 a.m. While they slept under a roof I quietly kept intact. Years blurred into performance reviews and product launches that pushed the agency into new markets. I climbed from senior designer at 26 to lead by 28, managing teams on campaigns that reached millions of users across platforms. The promotion to manager came at 31 with a salary of $165,000, equity options, and a corner office overlooking downtown traffic. I negotiated remote Fridays to avoid burnout, but still lived in the same studio, cooking bulk meals on Sundays and driving a reliable sedan paid off early. Every extra dollar funneled into the grant account without fail, covering rising property taxes and unexpected repairs that kept the house standing. Logan drifted through odd jobs that never lasted, bouncing between construction sites and delivery routes before quitting for vague reasons involving management. He moved back home permanently at 29, claiming burnout from corporate politics no one could verify. Dad converted the garage into a bedroom for him. Mom stocked the fridge with his preferred energy drinks. Phone calls home grew shorter as I juggled deadlines, but when they connected, Dad launched into updates about Logan's supposed role overseeing a barbecue chain expansion in the Midwest. Mom forwarded grainy photos on social media showing him in branded polos shaking hands at trade shows, captions praising her son's negotiation skills and work ethic. She ended most posts comparing his hands-on hustle to my desk job, implying screens couldn't build character like smoke pits and supplier deals. I scrolled past during lunch breaks, approved budgets for national rollouts, and wired the monthly transfer before coffee cooled. The pattern held steady until a group message exploded my notifications one Tuesday evening. Logan announced he was returning for good with blueprints for 3 barbecue locations across the Dakotas, each needing custom smokers and prime leases. He calculated startup costs at $180,000, citing investor interest that required immediate equity to close. Dad replied instantly with realtor contacts and mortgage refinance options, explaining the house carried minimal debt after years of careful payments. Mom scheduled open houses the following weekend, excited about downsizing once the chain took off and royalties flowed. Their enthusiasm spilled into voicemails left during my stand-up meetings. Dad detailed profit projections based on foot traffic studies Logan supposedly commissioned. Mom described menu tastings with local ranchers who pledged beef at cost. Social media flooded with renderings of neon signs and patio layouts, every update tagging Logan as visionary, while noting my absence from family planning sessions. I sat in conference rooms pitching interactive prototypes to executives' phone, vibrating with notifications about escrow timelines and contractor bids. The house appraisal came back higher than expected, fueling talks of using proceeds to secure matching loans for equipment. They debated color schemes for the first location over dinner's speakerphone, while I reviewed user analytics that influenced consumer spending habits nationwide. Logan dominated conversations with supplier quotes and celebrity chef endorsements he claimed were in negotiation. Dad offered to coach part-time at the flagship spot for publicity. Mom volunteered to handle bookkeeping using skills from the old store days. I listened muted on calls approving wireframes that streamlined online ordering for global brands and realized the grant had evolved from emergency aid into an endless subsidy for dreams that never materialized. The equity in their home, built partly on my contributions, now hung in balance for a venture built on bluster. Doubt crept in during a late-night scroll through LinkedIn updates from former classmates. Logan's profile showed vague titles with no endorsements gaps, screaming louder than any resume. Public records revealed a termination notice from his last job 3 years earlier for chronic absences and missed quotas. Credit reports tied to the home address listed $42,000 in unpaid balances across several cards, payments drawn from Mom and Dad's joint account in patterns that mirrored my grant deposits exactly. I cross-checked every transfer and saw the truth: my money bailed out his debts, while they praised his independence. The betrayal burned deeper than any client rejection or missed promotion. I cleared my schedule, packed a bag, and drove back to Sioux Falls without telling anyone. Ashley Donovan, my cousin visiting from Rapid City for a long weekend, answered the door Saturday morning with a surprised hug. She whispered that Logan's return had hijacked every conversation, his voice booming with franchise timelines and investor calls. We grabbed coffee in the kitchen while Mom scribbled realtor contacts on a yellow pad, and Dad sketched smoker placements on graph paper, the table cluttered with takeout menus and loan printouts. Ashley pulled me to the back porch after lunch, wind chimes clanging above Mom's neglected flower pots. She had overheard them the night before, Dad insisting the community fund could cover startup gaps until profits flowed. Mom agreeing its steady arrival made the plan safe. Ashley repeated their words verbatim: the support money would launch Logan's first location by spring. My chest tightened, realizing 7 years of my sacrifices now bankrolled a delusion that endangered the house I'd kept afloat. Ashley's eyes searched mine, her voice dropping as she admitted feeling invisible amid their single-minded focus. I retreated to my old bedroom that afternoon, claiming exhaustion, but pulling up every bank statement on my laptop. The screen glowed with rows of outflows, each one a choice to put them first. Ashley knocked around dusk, slipping in with a plate of reheated casserole and a cautious glance. We sat on the faded carpet, whispering about her healthcare admin interviews and the pressure to stay neutral. Voices rose from the living room over health permits and lease deposits. Ashley confessed extending her stay to escape the chaos, but couldn't ignore Mom dismissing her doubts with talk of family legacy and loyalty. The air felt thick with unspoken alliances. Decision hardened as I shut the laptop, the room's peeling wallpaper a reminder of choices long buried. I packed an overnight bag, left a note about work emergencies, and hugged Ashley goodbye at the door, her promise to text updates a fragile thread. I checked into a motel off the highway, printed transaction histories at the lobby computer, and lay awake mapping every word for Sunday's confrontation. Sleep fractured into restless fragments, alarm jolting me awake before dawn. I drove back to the house as sunlight crept over the horizon, hands steady on the wheel, ready to dismantle the lie at the one table where honesty had always been optional. Sunday dinner filled the house with the familiar scent of pot roast simmering since morning. Mom set the table with the good china reserved for holidays, plates clinking as Dad carved thick slices and passed them around. Logan sat at the head, gesturing with his fork about supplier contracts finalized that week. Ashley took the end seat, picking at her food, while conversation circled back to opening dates and ribbon-cutting ceremonies. Dad locked eyes on me across the mashed potatoes and said, "Your brother worked hard for everything he has. You should learn from him." Mom nodded, adding that real success came from grit, not shortcuts behind a screen. I laid the thick folder of statements in the center paper, rustling louder than silverware. Silence dropped like a curtain. "Then I'll stop the shortcuts," I replied, voice steady despite the pulse in my ears. I flipped open the cover, revealing 7 years of transfers totaling $168,000, each line itemized through the attorney's office. The final page showed the last payment canceled that morning. Mom's hand flew to her mouth. Dad's knife hovered midair. Logan leaned forward, eyes narrowing as he scanned the numbers. Accusations flew before anyone processed the total. Dad demanded to know why I hid it, claiming family shared burdens openly. Mom whispered about betrayal, tears welling as she traced the grant letter they once framed. Logan insisted the money came from community aid, not me, his voice rising to cover the tremor. Ashley watched without a word, fork forgotten in her grip. I slid copies across the table, pointing to routing numbers matching my personal account. Every emergency repair, every debt payoff, every extra grocery run traced back to promotions I earned and bonuses I never spent. The room heated with denials. Dad pounded the table, saying I owed them for raising me. Mom pleaded for understanding, arguing Logan needed the launch to prove himself. Logan scrolled his phone for proof of the chain's existence, screen blank, except old photos. I stood chair scraping wood floors scarred from years of family gatherings. "From now on, figure it out yourselves," I said. "I'm done being the ATM." Their shouts followed me to the door, overlapping with demands to fix the mess I created. Ashley's gaze met mine in the hallway mirror, silent but steady. I grabbed my keys from the hook by the entrance, the same one holding Logan's old Letterman jacket. Mom reached for my arm, fingers trembling as she begged me to stay and talk. Dad blocked the path to the garage, face red with confusion turning to anger. Logan trailed behind, muttering about jealousy ruining everything. I stepped around them, heart pounding but resolve unbreakable. The front door clicked shut behind me, muffling the chaos inside. Phone buzzed immediately with texts I ignored, blocking each number as notifications popped. The driveway blurred under streetlights, neighborhood houses shrinking in the rear view. I pulled over once to delete group chats and social media ties, fingers moving faster than thoughts. Years of enabling ended in one evening, the weight lifting with every blocked contact. Ashley sent a single message before I silenced her too, a thumbs-up emoji, nothing more. The highway stretched empty ahead, leading back to a life built on my terms alone. 6 months passed in a blink of quarterly reports and sprint reviews. Court filings confirmed the house entered foreclosure when payments stopped cold, sold at sheriff's auction to a flipper who gutted the kitchen Mom once painted sunny yellow. Mom and Dad crammed into a studio apartment behind a convenience store, fluorescent lights buzzing over a single hot plate and fold-out couch. They split minimum wage shifts at big box retailers, scanning items, while customers asked about the son who vanished from local headlines. Dad hawked his old playbook collection online. Mom returned her wedding dinnerware for store credit, both dodging block parties where neighbors whispered about the sudden drop. Logan clung to food delivery gigs, phone cracked from a drop during a rain-soaked run. Collectors garnished tips, leaving scraps for instant noodles and laundromat quarters. He slept in his dented sedan between shifts, parking lots, his new address after eviction notices piled up. Bankruptcy paperwork sat half-finished on a library computer, credit ruined enough to block even shared leases. I stayed anchored in Minneapolis, promoted to director, overseeing user experience for flagship apps. Pay hit $220,000 with performance incentives and unlimited PTO I used for silent retreats in the North Woods. Days blurred into design critiques from a glass-walled office, nights into spin classes and craft beer tastings with colleagues who never probed beyond surface stories. No contact locked in new SIM, scrubbed contacts, postal forwarding rejected. Ashley's single voicemail about a family reunion deleted unheard. Achievements compounded without distraction. I spearheaded a feature rollout that spiked engagement 15%, landing a keynote slot at a virtual summit streamed to thousands. Perks included premium lounge access on work trips to Portland and Nashville miles, banked for future solo adventures. Finances ballooned into high-yield accounts, and Roth contributions runway stretching toward goals untouched by guilt. Friendships deepened over shared ambitions, dates sparked on apps where pasts stayed private. The fallout crystallized fast. Dad's side hustle coaching Pee-wee teams dried up when parents opted for academy programs. Mom's knitting circle faded after she missed yarn swaps, needles gathering dust in a plastic bin. Logan's app ratings plummeted from forgotten orders routes shrinking to dead zones. They confronted the wreckage of habits, unbroken, no safety net to catch the fall. Sometimes cutting ties is the only way to protect your worth and live aligned with the success you create. To every listener who stayed through the storm, thank you for your patience until the final beat. Share below, have you ever severed a tie to save yourself? Your insight builds this space, and I'm deeply appreciative of every voice that chimes in.